Where do you have to start? What is the starting point? Who knows? The first thing you have to look to. Confessionality. Yes, very good. Confessionality. Yeah? Confessionality with the adults in primary schools. That means how present is the Catholic identity still today as a recognizable thing within the Catholic school. You could call this the passive capital or the petrol tank of the core of the Catholic school. How empty or how full is this petrol tank? And you see the adults in primary schools are really convinced that their schools are Catholic schools, that you can see this everywhere. 15% doubts a little bit, but there's a massive understanding of the confessionality of the Catholic schools. What will I ask now quickly to Jan? I will not continue this graph. I need to know something else immediately. You know what I want to know? No? 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 What do I want to know? Very quickly now?
The numbers?
Yeah, the students. Yeah, I need to see the students' confessionality. Yeah, can you have a quick look?
Primary school.
In the primary schools?
Yeah.
Up. Lower. That means that the students in primary schools read also the school. They read the school. And they have to read the confessionality of the school. It's much lower than in the adults. That means that the students do not recognize so much of the Catholic identity of the school spontaneously as the adults think. As the adults think. So they read the same reality in a different way. Yeah? The adults are too optimistic of what the children recognize as Catholic. Yeah? Or the students are too pessimistic, but it's the adults that are too optimistic.
Could it be that
Yeah.
they're at the school and they're always there, so they just don't see it because they're embedded in it? They just don't recognise what's around them as different to what could also be outside.
Yes, but the questions ask explicitly if they do recognize. Yeah? So that's a very important thing. You remember I showed yesterday a picture from St. Margaret's School with on the top these butterflies and on the bottom the Eucharist. And I have been reflecting yesterday evening after the lecture that I was perhaps too negative about that correlation, because I said there are two external things that are linked to each other. You remember I said that? Yeah. And they have nothing to do with each other. But afterwards I was thinking that's not true, because the butterfly can also refer to resurrection, because the butterfly is a transformation of a previous life, like also the Eucharist is transformative. And perhaps there is a deeper connection than I have criticized in my lecture, and it was not a fair comment. I was thinking yesterday evening. But why can I make that link? Because I'm initiated in a confessional context, and I recognize that this is a confessional context. Yeah? I had even one extra night as a theologian. I needed to understand this. Yeah? But if you see that the children's confessionality is much lower than the confessionality of the adults, then you have to be very careful in not overestimating the spontaneous possibility of children to recognize values as Christian values, will be the point I will make. Yeah? So the first thing we look at is the confessionality of the school, the passive presence of recognizable elements. If you quickly go to the secondary schools, do the same exercise, you will see what happens. Voila, the adults have a lower confessionality. If you now look to the students, voila. Yeah? And you see, it's not that, yeah, that's also a technical remark. If you see such a score, it does not automatically mean that it is low. You have always to look also to the traffic lights. It can be a big difference between very high and very low, and these two compensate in a middle point. So this can be a strong agreement on having no idea, but it can also reflect a high diversity of ideas. And that's what the case here. So some students see very strong confessionality, but others do not see, not at all. Yeah? So there's really a very big diversity among the students in secondary schools if you look to confessionality. Good, that's the first thing we try to look. So how much is there still in the petrol tank of that school is the question, in fact, of spontaneous Catholic identity. The higher that is, the more the school will think we have to do nothing at all because everything is Catholic here. While you're coming, everything is okay, if that's very high. Second thing we look at is the opposite, namely secularization. Also, again, very beautiful results. The school is not secularized. The school does not want to secularize. You see? The school is not secularized. The school does not want to secularize. There's a small shift, a little bit, but not very high. That's, yeah, I do not even know if you can draw conclusions from this. Jan, I look to you.
A small difference. In schools you could not, but with 3,711 respondents you can.
Yeah.
This number, every little difference is relevant. But in schools you cannot. It's such a small, it's just a rejection.
So that's a thing Jan warns to. If you go to a school with a small sample, for example, with 13 teachers in a primary school, if one teacher shifts 2 numbers, yeah, he has a bad day and he changes 2 numbers, yeah, then you see a drop in resistance. You cannot conclude that the school is secularizing out of that. But indeed, if you have such an immense sample of almost 4,000 people here, the smaller changes are indicative, in that case, of a slow motion form of secularization. But okay, it's not dramatic. Good, that's 2. The third thing we look to after confessionality and secularization is, where is the normative point of preference? Third question. The normative point of preference is recontextualization. That's very good news. These adults want to recontextualize the identity of their school. Yeah? And you can help them to see that reading the graphs, which is positive that they are doing this. Yeah? You can have a quick look to the students. Oh la la. Yeah. And have a look to the adults, not just looking here. Yeah. For secondary schools? Adults, yeah? Yeah, still also, that's very good. Students? Oh la la. Yeah? Be careful, that's a big drop. Eh? And a big sample, such a big drop, is a serious thing. Yeah? Go back, please. Okay. So they want recontextualization, and they are already doing a good job, they think, because they are already there, but they like to have more. So that's the third thing. So first, confessionality, secularization, looking to the normative point, which is mostly recontextualization on the normative perspective. Yeah? And they're already doing this, and they want more.
They think that,
well,
do they think they're already doing it?
Oh, yeah. On the factual level, that's the blue one.
But if they were already doing it, would the normative be so low for students?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, that's very nice you asked this question. Of course, I have the same question. I'm very curious. Jan, can you go to the next slide? Yeah, that's the question. Look. If they're already doing it, you can answer by looking to the students. Do the students recognize it? So you have to compare. Can you go back? 5.46 with 4.81. In another way, the adults overestimate not perhaps that they recontextualize, but they overestimate that the students can recognize this. You see? So it's also good to compare graphs with each other. Yeah? So it's much lower on the factual level than with the adults. Yeah? Okay? Good. So positive also that they want more. We can look here. There is an almost complete agreement on recontextualization. That's very positive. Yeah? Very positive. Another question that is often asked, that's between brackets, why is there no normative position for confessionality? You see that? There is no normative position for, you know the answer? What's the answer? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. What would you say as the reason? Yeah? So, we don't ask it because we don't want to know it. We just like to force them to think about the future. Yeah? So there's one professor at one defense of a master's thesis in Leuven who criticized the methodology of the Melbourne scale, saying that we should have had also introduced a normative level for the confessionality. Because he said, it's possible that a school does want to do nothing. And you don't leave the option that they just continue like they are doing until now. I said that's true, but that's not what we want to do. We want the schools to reflect on this. Yeah? So we want to make the confessionality to something active. And am I very happy with that answer of reconfessionalization? Who said that? Yeah? Well, in fact, you could say that reconfessionalization is the reactivation of confessionality. Yeah? Okay, so only on the factual level for confessionality. Okay? So we have seen the petrol tank is, yeah, this school has a very high petrol tank. Slow secularization, a clear option for recontextualization, which is overestimated on the level of the actual situation if we look to the students. Tony, that's another research question. Do you really think that you recontextualize? Your students don't see it. How would you explain that? Yeah. Of course, therefore you need a second lecture of yesterday, the difference between recontextualization and values education. Yeah? Because what do the children see in primary schools? They see values education. They don't see recontextualization. And then the discussion becomes what's the difference between values education and recontextualization. And that's the reason why they asked me to give a lecture on this during the visit we had today. If you go back to the adults, yeah, then you see here that they still strongly build their recontextualization on values education, in the factual and on the normative. Yeah? To be honest, but that's a theological remark, that's a disappointment. You know what is the ideal? Theologically seen, that values education drops and recontextualization increases. If you see that, you see that the school makes the analysis. But of course, the confessionality is too high. This school is not enough under pressure to make the shift. Yeah? So they have the luxury of a high confessionality, which is for them enough to do values education as a way to recontextualize. But they forget that the children have already a lower confessionality. And the more that this confessionality will get under pressure, the more values education will lead to secularization. Because the children don't see the connection between the Eucharist and the butterfly. Yeah? As long as you have a high confessionality, you can suppose that it is enough to have nice butterflies above the Eucharist, and that then the school will reconfessionalize. That's what we see here. Yeah. So the shift is not made, and the two go hands in hand with a small concern, and that's positive to reconfessionalize. So that's the pattern. Yeah. Recontextualization through values education, to reconfessionalize, to resist secularization based on a strong confessionality. Can you follow this, or is it, you see this, or? If you look now to the children, you see what do the children see? The children see values education to reconfessionalize. Yeah? They don't see much, well, they see recontextualization, but they see also reconfessionalization. Yeah? What do they want? Already in primary school, what do they want? They have lower confessionality. They want values education, but not too much to recontextualize. And surely not to reconfessionalize, but to secularize. That's the pattern. The same pattern will be seen in secondary school, but much stronger. Yeah? If you go there to the adults, now I do this very quickly. I will take some more distance. Yeah? So, the adults. Confessionality is lower. Yeah? Secularization is negative. A small decline of secularization. They want recontextualization on the normative level. They think they already do. They want more values education to support that, and they have a small concern to reconfessionalize. Quite the same pattern as the adults, but a little bit less strong. Everything is a little bit lower. Yeah? You see, again, a massive support for recontextualization. That's the way to go. Let's look to the students. Yeah, confessionality is very low. They see recontextualization. Jan, can you go one back? But not so high as the teachers think. Okay? They don't like recontextualization. They reject reconfessionalization. Yeah, they want values education, but no longer to recontextualize, but secularization becomes almost positive, even if, again, looking immediately to the right, there's a big discussion among the students. You see the same polarization among the students. A high support, 30% for secularization, a hesitating group of 1/3, and a group resisting secularization, 1/3. Yeah? That's what we see in secondary schools. Yeah? So a big difference. Could also say that's positive because you can have dialogue among these different groups. So you see how quickly you can recognize the patterns. Yeah? Confessionality, secularization, looking for the normative point, but that's almost not here, the normative point. Everything drops. Yeah, they have had enough at the end of secondary school, you could say. Yeah? And then looking to these three profiles, they see also reconfessionalization and they resist. Yeah? You can do values education, but do not exaggerate. That's a little bit, you can do it, but the tendency towards secularization is clear. Okay, the question comes back, is your question, my question, what happens when they leave then secondary school? Yeah? So that's perhaps when we visit in 2015 to give an answer at. Yeah? It will be an interesting research question. Okay. You see the adults want to shift to recontextualization, and the young people follow hesitantly. Yeah? So a nice topic if you speak to students in a school is how do they experience recontextualization? Do they recognize? Do they want to get involved in that? Could be a research question if you can talk to them. Yeah? The adults have a small concern to reconfessionalize, and the students reject in a growing degree. Everybody of the adults rejects secularization, but the resistance disappears when they get older. Be careful, these are 20,000 people in this graph. 20,000 people. So that's really significant, yeah, what you see happening here. If you look on the current level, what do the students see? They see much more values education than recontextualization. Yeah? And you see here again the drop of the confessionality when they get older. You see also, that's interesting, how the parents constantly overestimate the Catholicity of their schools. Yeah? More than, and you see that the teachers have a more realistic insight into this. Is there more in this graph, Jan? Okay.